So it's a magical day here in Wood End, and I decided to come and see my client's garden, Stonehill, just to see how it's tracking really. It's very much on the descent. You know, if you had a bell curve, it would be right down the bottom before it starts to bottom out. But it's still looking amazing, and particularly in this light. You know, these gardens are all about light and light catching. And looking up through here and seeing this Calamagrostis with its pale straw colours, and then reflected in exactly the same vertical form in the black-seeded Veronicastrum down the bottom is just so magical, and the kind of layers on the way back. So much of this planting and this style of planting is being able to see over the top at a distance, and that probably could be seen to be essential to the difference between this kind of planting and traditional herbaceous border planting, which is all about presenting things on a graded height scale. In this case, the point is to see right over the top of it and to see all the different textures and the way light catches the different kinds of floral textures and seed heads that are visible right now. There's a really nice blend of straw-coloured seeds, of pure seed head shape, and also still quite a lot of floral content. This is Penstemon Blackbird, still presenting quite a lot of really rich kind of ruby red, as are, of course, the kind of Mexican salvias, which will just keep going. Once they start, they just keep going until frost starts. And so the foreground one here is Anthony Parker, much later to start flowering than indigo spires in the background. And but still will just continue until such time as frost finally finishes them off. The penetrating light really starts to show up the difference between the various grasses, and Calamagrostis back there is all about its seed heads. You don't even see its foliage. But Panicum, in this climate, we do still see quite a lot of foliage. We don't get a lot of flower here. It tends to get a bit too dry for it to flower very much. But you see this gorgeous gold as the light comes through. The sunshine is just penetrating the tips of those. And then from here I'm seeing two echoing, a foreground clump of that and a background clump of that. And then right in the middle, Phlomis tuberosa, forming those brown candles. That sound, by the way, is a snake repellent mechanism here. I don't think I've ever seen any snakes here, but maybe that's why. Anyway, there's these little knobs up the stems of the seed heads of the Phlomis, which flowers very early in the season, and possibly a bit too early. You know, I find that the seed heads appear a little too early for my liking, but now when everything else is going to seed, they really just match in and sit in sync with the rest of it and look so fantastic as a contrast against the gold. As does this Teucrium hircanicum, which was an addition by the client. They put this in and has seeded itself around like crazy, probably excessively, but at the same time now you see the shapes of these really vertical forms. Now we probably could have deadheaded that to get a fair bit more flower out of it, but I'm really glad we didn't, because really the shapes of the seed heads are at least as important as the colour contribution of the flower. One of the key design principles here, or at least their overriding philosophies, was the idea of echoing the same plant into the distance, so that from here, for instance, I can see Sedum matrona right to the left in the foreground, Sedum matrona in the midground, Sedum matrona in the background, and echoing all the way around me in very deliberately placed repetition, so that it kind of bounces and echoes, so that your eye leaps from one to the other. And it has an incredibly amplifying power on the floral impact when they're in bloom. So there's something about the same plant echoing off that turns the volume right up on it. Now, a plant like that obviously can be seen to be a key player. It can be, a single clump would be telling, but echo that off 7 or 8 times, or in this case maybe a dozen times, and it just turns up its power enormously. But the grasses are critical to this garden, and this Stipa gigantea possibly more so than any other. It's just this fabulous vase shape, the way it just arcs out and down, and the way it harvests light right from early on in the season when it flowers just before Christmas and then goes to seed. It's magical all the way through. And standing here, I'm looking at it, then vertical spires of Nephofia. Now, I normally would insist on that Nephofia being deadheaded because it just looks so horrible when the last of its flowers are out. But seeing these vertical green spires in the foreground and then in the midground beyond as well, I'm so glad they weren't deadheaded. That looks fantastic. There's also the really beautiful silvery, ghostly silver seed heads of Perovskia through there, which are a beautiful contrast against the straw colours and the pink of the Agastache sweet lily. So all up, I think it's a really satisfying blend of light-catching grassy seed heads, a little bit of late flower, some nice shapes, some nice forms. We're just about to fill this full of spring bulbs to stretch the season still further, but I'm really happy with how it's looking this late.